This time only one slogan, Modi हटाओ, देश बचाओ.
आप यहाँ मोदी मोदी कर रहे हैं और वहाँ कुछ लोगों की नींद हराम हो रही है.
देखा? आपने देखा? शुरू हो गया ना काम?
Welcome to the election soundtrack. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and today we're going to do something a little different. The biggest election story today is undoubtedly the Congress Manifesto, a 55-page manifesto that they say they've taken a year to put together. There have been a host of reactions to the manifesto. The Congress claiming it's a game changer, the BJP saying it's full of lies. But what do you make of it? I have with me today Sanjay Pugalia, editorial director of Quintillion Media, to help me sort of go through the maze of this manifesto. Sanjay, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking you what you made of it.
Bit of a departure from the past, because Congress party or any political party's manifestos are kind of a very boring and bland reading and lots of motherhood statements. But in this manifesto, I see simplicity of language, clarity, and new language, and they are kind of being very specific about the actionable points. Otherwise, they are generally very broad brush. So they are trying to be very specific, which is a good thing.
A couple of things that struck me, and let's talk about jobs first, because they say and everyone says it's a big election issue. And in the jobs section of the manifesto, I felt that the Congress had sort of returned to its default mode of big government. So the first attack on jobs is that you'll fill government vacancies, then you'll increase Manrega to 150 days. There'll be government-backed employment through Seva Mitra and Asha and other schemes. Do you think there was enough to talk about how you'd encourage private sector to grow and thus create more jobs?
Yeah, but in a way you are right, because you have not registered that as a headline, even though they have spoken a lot about giving push to private investment. They are kind of admitting that only government expenditure and government efforts cannot deliver the kind of growth India needs to prosper. So they are talking about free market economy, etc. That means that government actually gets shrunk going forward, but they are not very clear about it. They are not very vocal about it. As far as jobs are concerned, they are talking about smaller numbers vis-a-vis 2 crore jobs per year of BJP. They are talking about 22 lakh jobs plus 10 lakh jobs by March 2020. These are the jobs which are on regular basis available for you to fill up vacancies. In terms of one big idea that will generate employment at some scale is not directly visible in the manifesto, that they are talking in terms of macroeconomic approach that they are going to have. And that is why the kind of criticism we have been hearing on job crisis, this manifesto lacks a bit.
The only interesting thing, and I'm not sure how the private sector will take it, was maybe the apprenticeship program, where any business with more than 100 employees has to have an apprenticeship program, pay these people stipend, skill them, train them, and then when you have a vacancy, pick from this pool. The only incentive these companies have is that, they'll amend CSR laws to include this apprenticeship program in it. How do you think businesses will react to this?
I mean, they are habituated of all this, that every time, sometime they are being asked as affirmative action that you have to reserve jobs for downtrodden, underprivileged classes, and then apprenticeship scheme or Skill India schemes. I really find these things only as a slogan. And this is a bad idea. I mean, I was expecting, on one hand, you are talking about modern progressive governance. At the same time, government will do everything is the approach that this manifesto at some point shows. This is not a great idea, but Congress is known for having a hold-all approach and coming up with lots of retail items. this is very important to kind of cater to your different voter or interest groups. But this bits and pieces approach doesn't really result into something big and transformational.
Also, the love of committees. There will be a committee to implement Nyay, committee for small and marginal farmers, new version of planning commission with 100 members, and scores of other committees actually through that manifesto.
Yeah, you can interpret it in two ways. A, that this government really wants to show, Congress wants to show that when we come to power, we believe in consensus building involving you all, because government is not run by one individual or certain individuals. People should participate and all of that. That is why this committee mechanism comes into the play. I think on certain things they are hedging a bit. They are not showing enough confidence. Like, I was very impressed with the idea of Nyay, minimum income guarantee scheme, which is a very, very scaled down version of basic income scheme that we globally understand what happened in places like Canada or some pilot project in UK or in Liberia or Kenya. So these projects are tested and tried. They are talking about a bold idea, but still they are saying we will approach it in a phased manner, we will run some pilot and all that. The whole idea, the philosophy is very simple. Give free cash to poor, trust them that they will use it wisely. You do not try to be a statist, big my-bap government where you will put conditions, approval processes, and hazard kind of red tapeism around it. Just let them use that money. This whole premise that poor don't know how to use money is wrong. That has been globally proved. And when you spend $1, you save $3 in long term by way of a reduction in crime, by way of fewer court cases, by way of these guys, beneficiaries, they work harder and they work more and they spend on education. So actually, government's administrative costs should be brought down and the money should be just given to them without putting much conditions. Free money, unconditional. That should be the approach. But they know this is not palatable. Middle class will revolt. Some other people will say something. Taxpayers will revolt. This is the lack of confidence on the part of Congress party that they want to show some bold ideas, very, very new generation ideas. At the same time, they are hedging it a bit.
Did you get a sense that, we know Congress's position is generally left of center, but you're veering even more towards the left with the promise of 6% of GDP for education, 3% for healthcare, though they've said by 2024, so they've given themselves 5 years if they come to power to implement it.
Look, the way I see it, be it any party, Tamanna, basically they all, by way of all such welfareism and by way of basic income or targeted minimum guarantee schemes, it is an admission in itself that our core promise of governance has failed. So we have to do all these emergency operations, but this must be followed by a promise that how we are going to come back on track to really govern, where government allows the entrepreneurial spirit to unleash itself, and then country grows and prospers. Because of the lack of opportunity, because of the counter or say side effects of globalization that we all pursued, now there is a serious issue of income inequality, and that is a big challenge in India. That is why governments have to spend money on health and education. Congress goes further. Now they are talking about that health insurance should not be in the hands of private players, it should be in the hands of government only. So they are of the view that governments have to be present in the spaces where there is lots of deprivation and poverty. Till we bring them out of poverty, we have to play that role. Now, this is a difficult choice, but one has to make a choice. So they have taken this center and little more left path.
Another point I think we should touch upon when we're talking about the manifesto is some bold, risky, you can say, moves which have already attracted Tukre gang input accusations. One is, of course, let's review AFSPA to balance needs of security forces and human rights, review deployment of armed forces in the valley. I thought even asking under trials, depending on the seriousness of their crime and how much time they spent in jail, bail to be let out. These are risky things that they've stuck their neck out for in the current environment.
I agree. In the current environment, a rational discussion is not possible, and any political rival will attack the opposition party that you are now becoming Tukde gang, you are pandering to separatists, to Maoists, etc. But I think this is a political response to the situation. There are so many injustice and unfair things happening everywhere that somebody has to stick his neck out and say that he is going to, or the party is going to look at these things which are fundamentally unfair and puts an individual to a disadvantageous position when the state takes a certain view of these things. So be it Armed Forces Special Power Act, look, now they are talking about decriminalizing defamation cases. Yeah. They are talking about amending the entire law around sedition because that has been misused. Now, if you are into the hyper-nationalistic business, then of course you are going to feel bad about it, and to your constituents you are going to say that this manifesto is dangerous, but that is also not the truth, right?
A couple of other things I think notable and mentionable which at least caught my eye. One is to bring about a law against hate crime. And another to bring about a law against discrimination in housing societies, in jobs, in entries to restaurants, or anything based on gender, caste, or religion. I think these are issues which need some focus on.
Absolutely. I think, again, bringing some law against hate crime is a touchy area, and BJP is going to make lots of noise around it. But I think this is a very bold and sensible move. Please understand, there is a crime of passion, personal crime, and there is a crime which is organized and a syndicated crime. What we saw as mob lynching, what we saw as this cow vigilantism, they were part of organized crime, and state by either it was keeping quiet, if forced, they took some action, but then those guys got released on bail, and then you saw the reality that the accused of Akhlaq murder is sitting on the front rows of UP Chief Minister. So these are very dangerous signs. So as far as this particular idea is concerned, that there has to be law against hate crime, is something very significant, and I hope that there is a consensus on this.
Well, last question, and the million-dollar one. Do manifestos win elections? We've seen manifestos don't matter at all in the last few elections.
So, not really. If you recall today also, the more exciting part was about when he was talking about Rafale or Chowkidar or wo chhute hain, se debate nahi karte, or about such things which are hyperbolic. So they draw more attention in mass public conversation. So manifestos don't really get votes. They are not really read. And you remember those famous dialogue by Chaudhry Devilal, that manifesto is written by someone who himself doesn't read it ever.
Well, let's hope people do read manifestos, because it's important to know the choices you have and the promises being made.
But I must confess, and you are quite familiar with that I have a very serious problem of short attention span, and I don't really read these heavy documents. But this one came a bit as an easy read, and I did read some part of it, and I find it a good job.
So just a small plug here for anyone listening in. If you don't want to do the tough work of reading the full manifesto, we've broken it down for you on BloombergQuint.com. So do check that out. And thank you so much, Sanjay, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks, Tamanna.
So that was Sanjay Pugalia discussing and breaking down the Congress manifesto with me on Election Soundtrack. We'll be back tomorrow with all the latest stories which you need to know going into this election story. Stay tuned.
I hope you enjoyed Election Soundtrack. Election Soundtrack is also available on the IVM podcast app, where you can look at other shows that you might enjoy. Shows like The Seen and the Unseen, hosted by Amit Verma, Ganatantra, hosted by Saryu and Alok, The Pragati podcast, hosted by Pawan Srinath, Pulyabazi, hosted by Pranay Kotastane and Saurabh Chandra, and How to Citizen, hosted by Meghnad and Shreyas Manohar. Check out the IVM podcast app to get more talk content that you'll enjoy.